They received orders to eliminate a Viet Cong stronghold filled with booby traps, sniper positions, and concealed tunnels, and then protect U.S. convoys traveling along a perilous highway. Yet, what unfolded in the Nui Vai Hills would push the Australians' self-discipline, leadership, and survival skills to their limits. The operational story continues. In October 1966, the 5th Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment was set to take on missions presenting numerous new challenges, including an incursion into the jungle-covered, rocky, and cave-laden Viet Cong stronghold of the Nui Vai Hills. The enemy had dwelled undisturbed in this safe haven for an extended period prior to the arrival of the 1st Australian Task Force. Clearing the Nui Vai Hills was crucial for a forthcoming U.S. Army operation known as Robin, in which the 1 ATF was to play a role. Max Carroll. In the grand scheme of things, the war was intensifying, with a significant increase of U.S. forces underway. To alleviate congestion at the upriver port of Saigon, new troops and supplies would disembark at Vung Tau and then travel by road through Phuoc Tuy to bases in Bearcat, Long Bin, and Bien Hoa. These installations were accessible via Route 15, which the VC frequently targeted. The 1 ATF had the mission of securing Route 15 within Phuoc Tuy province, spanning from Ba Ria to a small village called Phu My, located about 22 kilometers northwest, where an Army of the Republic of Vietnam post was also situated. Our old allies, the U.S. 173rd Airborne Brigade, were assigned to continue the operation north of Phu My through Bien Hoa province to Bearcat, which was another 26 kilometers up the road, and the destination for the first convoy we were set to protect, the 3 Brigade of the 4th U.S. Infantry Division. In the 1 ATF area, Route 15 was flanked by the prominent hills of Nui Din and Nui Vai, along with a smaller peak, Nui Ong Trin, extending southwest toward the road. There was another peak, Nui Tok Tien, positioned further east but not deemed a direct threat from the VC. Route clearance was an operation of 1 ATF, with 5 RR assigned to a stretch of about 15 kilometers, while 6 RR's A Company covered the shorter section closer to Ba Ria. 6 RR had recently succeeded in Operation Vaucluse in the Nui Din Hills, and D Company of 6 RR was set to patrol that area again as a reinforcement. The mission assigned to 5 RR was substantial. We were tasked with securing the road between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. from October 11 to 16, during which 2 convoys of 50 trucks would pass each day. This was Operation Robin, and the schedule was strict. Our fire support base needed to be situated about halfway along the 15-kilometer stretch of Route 15 we were responsible for, ensuring we could provide artillery coverage for all our dispersed companies. The thick vegetation along the road forced us to patrol a wide area on either side of the highway. The prominent hills of Nui Vai and Nui Ong Trin were within range of VC mortars targeting the road, so we had to clear those out first. We were allotted 5 days, from October 6 to 10, to scout the peaks and western slopes, which was to kick off Operation Canberra, seamlessly leading into Operation Robin. Having just returned from Operation Crow's Nest on October 3rd, we were back in high gear for preparations. For both Operations Canberra and Robin, we set up our fire support base near the road close to a hamlet named Ap Ong Trin DP. Alongside our usual direct support battery, 103 Field Battery, we also had 2 155mm self-propelled guns from Battery A of the 235 Artillery Regiment. This unit was part of the U.S. artillery assigned to 1 ATF and was typically stationed in the task force base area. Since 6RR was fully engaged with other duties, we had to provide our own troops for the protection of the guns during Operation Canberra. 11 Platoon from D Company and the anti-tank platoon took on this responsibility under the command of Captain Ron Boxall, the second in command of D Company. The remaining members of D Company stayed with battalion headquarters as palace guard. This arrangement left us with 3 companies available for searches, and we also took 2 of the 3 sections of our mortar platoon into the hills, scheduled to be airlifted in on October 7th once the BHQ objective was secured. We traveled to our starting point by road and left the armored personnel carriers on Route 15 south of Ap Ong Trin DP, swiftly deploying towards our target area to the north. While this method wasn't ideal, the limited time we had for the operation made it our best option. We moved for several thousand meters through dense scrub until we reached the base of the hills, with B Company going around the west side and C Company on the east flank of Nuiong Trin. A company led the way, followed by BHQ and D Company, heading toward the summit of Nuiong Trin. While we didn't reach the top on the first day, we made it up there the next morning, October 7th, with our search up to that point being rather uneventful. However, an unnecessary issue arose when I received a radio call from Captain Ron Boxall telling me that the commanding officer of 1 Field Regiment had arrived at our fire support base, disliked the location, and was moving the guns. He wanted to know what he should do since he was responsible for their protection. This was the first we'd heard of this situation. Neither John Warr nor Neville Gare, the battery commander, had been consulted, which was unacceptable because the guns wouldn't be able to support us while they were in transit. This led to some heated exchanges with HQ-1 ATF. Our CO ordered Ron's gun protection group to stay put, and the commander of 1 ATF overruled the irrational order from the CO of 1 Field Regiment. As a result, we regained our fire support base and continued our mission. The target for BHQ on October 7th was a twin-peaked feature, located about 1,500 meters to the northeast of Nuiong Trin. I had named the Twin Peaks Julie and Jan after 2 teenage friends of my family. C Company crossed over from the eastern flank of Nuiong Trin to investigate the 2 peaks while heading to their search area for Day 3, which was the southern slope of Nui Thi Vai. A company initially moved out from Nuiong Trin, descending into a steep, jungle-covered valley. Upon reaching the valley floor, A Company broke away, heading further northeast and skirting around Hill Julie before beginning their climb up Nui Thi Vai. It took A Company quite a while to navigate down the slope, and we were worried about BHQ Group and D Company reaching our objective before nightfall. We requested Iroquois helicopter support to stand by in case we found an extraction landing zone on Nuiong Trin to take us to the landing zone we knew was nestled between the twin peaks. In any case, D Company discovered a suitable landing zone on Nuiong Trin, from which they flew us to our destination. However, the lead scouts of the BHQ group overlooked the turnoff made by D Company as they headed to the LZ from A Company's route. We ended up trekking the whole way on foot, grumbling about the unfortunate scouts and the tough, steep terrain. Thankfully, when we finally reached the objective area, it was secure. Our plan was to stay put, so D Company took over Hill Jan while we, the BHQ group, occupied Hill Julie. Meanwhile, the pioneers worked on expanding the LZ, and our 2 sections of mortars were set up at its edge once they were airlifted in. With this strong defensive setup, we were able to effectively manage communications with our searching companies and provide mortar support. On the 3rd day of our search, Saturday, October 8th, things started off quietly. Our command team welcomed the Deputy Operations Officer, Captain Peter Isaacs, who had been stationed at Nui Dat. By the time I reached BHQ on Hill Julie, Operation Canberra had been ongoing for 2 days. I avoided the arduous walk from the flat area beside Route 15, and the disagreements about the FSB being relocated on orders from the CO of 1 Field Regiment without consulting the CO of 5 RAR. During my absence, Captain Bob Supple, the 2 IC of Support Company, filled in for me. I arrived by helicopter on the morning of October 8th. Earlier that day, we received unconfirmed reports of a VC mobile battalion nearby. At 10 a.m., C Company encountered enemy fire from multiple directions, while 8 platoon was engaged. Major John Miller, C Company's commander, initially reported contact with what might be a company-sized force. The VC retreated, but C Company suffered 7 casualties from booby traps, and another man twisted his ankle. All of them were evacuated by dust-off, which took about an hour. Around 2 p.m., C Company informed us that the makeshift houses and livestock enclosures they were in were heavily booby-trapped. They reported another 5 injuries and requested additional dust-off. C Company faced significant challenges for several hours in evacuating casualties from their jungle-covered mountainside location, resulting in a loss of 13 men. Also at 2 p.m., B Company reported spotting a group of VC on the lower western slopes of Nui Thi Vai. The forward scout from 5 Platoon, Private Colin Cogswell, aged 19, and his second scout, Private Doug Hillier, were both involved in the situation. Cogswell discovered a booby trap and neutralized it. Moments later, he picked up enemy voices nearby. With Hillier covering him from a stationary position, Cogswell advanced to investigate. He first spotted 15 VC, and shortly after, more enemy forces appeared. He stayed hidden for nearly an hour after Hillier cautiously pulled back to report what he had found. Cogswell maneuvered to within 5 meters of the enemy, remaining unseen as he observed their movements. His success was due to his masterful use of natural cover from rocks and dense vegetation, along with his stealthy movement skills and composure under pressure. Meanwhile, Major Bruce McWalter had started to strategically position B Company for an attack. During this, we were alerted by 1 ATF that the HQ of VC-274 Regiment was believed to be in close proximity. A task force intelligence officer was on the way to give us an update. B Company was advised to exercise extreme caution, and A Company was on standby should assistance be needed. C Company, while closer to B Company, was still occupied with casualty evacuation. Shortly after, Major Alex Piper from HQ-1 ATF arrived and confirmed that HQ-274 Regiment was indeed nearby. John Warr stepped aside from the command group to weigh his options. Should he allow B Company to proceed with its attack, or redirect both B and C Companies to withdraw and call for artillery and air support? It's unknown what went through John Warr's mind during that brief moment, but he ultimately decided to cancel the planned assault. Perhaps he recalled advice he had received before the battalion was deployed to Vietnam. The respected general officer commanding Eastern Command, Major General Tom Daly, had once told John that if he found himself in a situation where delaying an action might yield the same outcome while saving soldiers' lives, he should opt for the delay, as those lives held the highest priority. I must admit, I felt a sense of disappointment at B Company being ordered to abandon its attack plan. However, I firmly believe that if they had gone through with it, there likely would have been casualties and life-altering injuries. John Warr was right. Protecting his soldiers' lives was the most important consideration in a conflict that was already fraught with danger, focused on Australia's national survival. The main reason John was so respected by everyone in the battalion was his genuine care for us. Max Carroll B Company felt disappointed when they were ordered back to a safer spot to the west, and C Company was also relocated before both VC areas were pounded with heavy artillery from our forward support base. Our 4 mortars joined in on the assault, and those clearly marked target areas must have made life pretty uncomfortable for the VC. We had a U.S. Army helicopter light fire team made up of 2 heavily armed Iroquois called Derringer, ready to support us. They were summoned in during brief lulls in the artillery and mortar fire to launch high-explosive rockets and unleash heavy fire from their multi-barreled machine guns on opportunity targets. As they flew low, they attracted heavy ground fire, which their side-door gunners effectively returned. It was clear that the target areas were well defended, suggesting a long fight ahead. We requested an airstrike for any tough targets, and soon after, a U.S. forward air controller, known as Bird Dog, arrived overhead in his small Cessna. He got briefed on the situation as he circled above, getting familiar with our positions and the targets. His relaxed tone seemed to disguise his expertise. He clearly knew what he was doing. Before long, a flight of 4 F-100 Super Sabre fighter bombers roared in, circling while the FAC briefed them. Then, the FAC swooped in low, marking the target area with white phosphorus smoke rockets before getting out of the jet's way. The initial passes came from the west across our front, and we had a great view from Hill Julie. The target was bombarded with 500-pound high-explosive bombs and cluster bomb units. These canisters burst just above the ground, scattering smaller fragmentation bomblets that either exploded on contact or remained dormant to go off when disturbed. The F-100s then changed their approach, flying low over Hill's Jan and Julie, startling us with their roaring passes. After dropping all their heavy ordnance, they once more came in low, strafing with their 20mm cannons and firing salvos of HE 70mm Mighty Mouse rockets. It was a truly impressive display of ground attack air power. I had never witnessed such a level of destruction in such a brief period, so when the FAC offered us a second wave, we gladly accepted. During the short pause between airstrikes, our artillery and mortars relentlessly bombarded the area, ensuring the VC experienced no relief. The second wave intensified the destruction, introducing napalm to the situation, which was chilling to observe as the igniting petroleum jelly seeped into caves and any opening it encountered. We expressed our gratitude to the FAC for his invaluable support as he signed off and headed home, just as dusk settled in. Unfortunately, any surviving VC now had the cover of darkness to aid their escape. Earlier in the day, our CO had wisely ordered 1,081mm mortar bombs to be flown to our position at Julie, and thankfully, they arrived. It seemed this caused some discontent along the supply line, as those bombs were sourced from task force reserves at Nui Dat, which needed replenishment. Realizing that most of his mortar supplies were being delivered to us, our brigadier called for replacement stocks from the 1st Australian Logistics Support Group in Vung Tau. We soon learned that some personnel within 1 ALSG were frustrated because they had to hustle to get the replacement ammunition to us quickly, especially on a weekend. But we weren't concerned about the day of the week or their preferred work schedules. We needed those bombs, and we were ready to use them. During their 2-day breaks from operations at Vung Tau, many likened the atmosphere there to that of a beach resort. While that might seem a bit harsh, the differences were significant and had a lasting impact. There was a strong desire to set themselves apart from those stationed in such a setting. As a result, the old British Army term POGOs, which stands for Personnel on Garrison Operations, came back into common use, sometimes even with a tone of disdain when it seemed warranted. Infantrymen humorously accepted the inevitable retort, grunts, borrowed from the Americans. However, POGO was far milder than its U.S. counterpart, a label that Australian combat soldiers firmly refused to adopt for their base personnel. Max Carroll. The harassing fire we utilized to disrupt possible VC withdrawal routes during the night had to come from our mortars, as it wasn't feasible to move large quantities of heavy artillery shells to our forward operating base in time. The 4 mortars with us fired around 960 rounds throughout the night, leaving us all short on sleep. The following morning, B and C companies moved back to the spots they had vacated the day before to continue their search, but the VC had vanished, taking their losses with them. Now we needed to reassess our situation as we were on day 4 of our 5-day operation, having just experienced a significant encounter. This suggested a reasonably strong VC presence in the area, and we still had plenty of ground to cover. It was clear that we would need to return to Nui Thi Vai after concluding Operation Robin, but for the time being, we had to search and clear the slopes and crest right in front of us. A company's search of the Nui Thi Vai crest and down to the pagoda on the northwestern spur was uneventful, except for the capture of a suspect Buddhist monk, who was handed over to Captain Bob O'Neill, our intelligence officer, for questioning. B Company's search, however, yielded impressive results. They cautiously covered the airstrike area and discovered a large VC camp spanning several hundred meters, featuring 15 huts, caves, a tunnel system, a water supply, medical supplies, ammunition, grenades, mines, rockets, as well as clothing and gear. They also retrieved a valuable stash of documents that provided insights into the company structure. They managed the installation and listed the VC units and numbers that had recently passed through. This was a significant VC base area. Discovering this site and its contents surely relieved some of the company's earlier frustrations. C Company's search yielded impressive results, explaining why the area where they had sustained casualties was monitored by trail watchers and rigged with booby traps. They uncovered 2 company-sized bases, which included a hospital and a stockpile of medical supplies, a booby trap factory, explosives, ammunition, general supplies and equipment, numerous valuable documents, and a large amount of rice. Arguably the most crucial item found was a map on a 1/50,000 scale that outlined the VC track system for western Phuoc Tuy and other fortified locations. Both companies reported that the airstrikes were highly effective, with many direct hits, making it hard to count the weapon pits and other defensive spots. We sent back all the documents and some medical supplies to Task Force for analysis. The remaining supplies, ammunition, equipment, and rice were destroyed since they were too challenging to remove. Time was of the essence, and the destruction process took longer than anticipated, so we couldn't finish dismantling all the installations before moving on to meet our deadline for participating in Operation Robin. The final day was rather uneventful, as the search teams proceeded to their extraction point, LZ Michael, at the northwestern end of Nui Vai. B Company then traveled by APCs to their designated position on Route 15 in preparation for Operation Robin set to begin the following day, while Companies A, C, and D were airlifted to theirs. BHQ, along with the mortars and pioneers, was also airlifted back to the fire support base. We successfully repositioned on the afternoon of October 10th, marking the conclusion of Operation Canberra. Leaving Nui Vai brought mixed emotions. We had inflicted casualties on the VC, wounding several, yet C Company had 12 wounded along with one additional injury, and D Company had also seen one man hurt. Nonetheless, the operation was regarded as a significant success, having severely disrupted important VC forces, compelling them to hastily abandon a long-held sanctuary and discovering and destroying 3 large installations, along with associated supplies and equipment. The intelligence gained from the captured documents was invaluable. The VC faced significant damage from the airstrikes, artillery, and mortar fire, all of which were precise, but the extent of the impact would remain unknown to us. We were aware that we would return to Nui Vai and that we would be anticipated. For now, Operation Robin was about to commence. The official account, Talong Tan, summarizes Operation Robin in just 2 sentences. The clearance of the western side of the Nui Vai ensured the smooth conduct of Operation Robin. One security patrol received ineffective sniper fire, and several mines were set off harmlessly while checking the roadway, but the U.S. troop convoys passed through without incident. For those of us on the ground, it was a much more complex situation. Our units were spread across 15 kilometers of our designated area, starting at Phumai in the north and moving southward as depicted in Map 10, B Company, C Company, BHQ, and Support Company, located with the FSB, followed by D Company and A Company, whose southern border met 6RR. Each rifle company was equipped with a section of APCs for quick redeployments, as well as their own engineering combat teams to clear the roads of mines and booby traps each morning. We initiated our operations as soon as we arrived on the afternoon of October 10th, and we quickly found our first mines. Sadly, we also had a sapper wounded by a booby trap, and an APC lost a track due to a mine on the roadside. Later that same afternoon, an incident occurred when a Sioux helicopter, supporting our mission, crashed. The aircraft was flying low over the road between companies when a rotor blade seemed to hit a roadside telegraph pole and broke apart. A metal fragment struck the pilot, Second Lieutenant Bill Davies, in the head, causing a serious injury. Fortunately, both Davies and his passenger, Staff Sergeant Sailor Mealing, the quartermaster sergeant of B Company, survived, mainly because the crash happened close to C Company, where our regimental medical officer, Captain Tony White, happened to be waiting for a pickup. As noted by Bill Davies in Chapter 14, Tony's quick response at the scene saved Davies' life. He recognized the urgency of the situation and directed the dust-off to take him straight to a specialized hospital in Saigon for surgery. Mealing's injuries weren't too severe, but he still had to head back to Australia. I knew him well from our time together in 3RR in Malaya. This all unfolded the afternoon before Operation Robin officially kicked off. The threat of sniper fire was always looming, and our patrols had to consistently stay well back from the road during the day. Helicopter pilot reports highlighted where they encountered enemy fire while flying over Route 15 and the surrounding areas, before and during the operation. Each day we meticulously checked the road, its edges and culverts for mines and booby traps before 0900 hours. Throughout the day, APC-mounted infantry patrols moved between convoys to ensure enemy activities wouldn't disrupt our operations. There was a significant amount of civilian activity in our area, with several villages and hamlets lining the road, and numerous charcoal-producing ovens serving as a primary source of income for local farmers. We were vigilant, watching all movement closely. Most locals were Buddhists, but there were also two villages with Catholic refugees from North Vietnam, Ap Ong Trin Dp and Long Cat, which were well kept and defensively solid. We took the opportunity to build strong relationships with these communities, as they were against the VC. We even helped by supplying some barbed wire to bolster their defenses, and Tony White, along with a dentist from the Task Force Dental Unit, spent a day providing much appreciated care. The convoys rolling through were an impressive sight. Although we aimed to limit it to 50 vehicles at a time, that number was often surpassed, creating an endless stream. I believe around 1,200 men traveled up the road daily during the operation. Each convoy was escorted by U.S. Army APCs, with a command and control helicopter above and fire teams of gunships keeping a watchful eye on the sides. It was a remarkable show of American strength, and we hoped any VC observers who were back in the hills behind us took note. The official history's brief mention doesn't truly capture the intensity of this period, filled with crucial elements of cooperation among forces and interactions with the civilian population along the essential Route 15 during Operation Robin. Plans were set in motion for a return to Nui Thi Vai, and Brigadier Jackson, the task force commander, approved the proposed strategy. During one of his routine visits, he agreed to John War's request not to impose a deadline on the operation's completion. Past experiences made it clear that there was still much to learn at Nui Thi Vai, and having the freedom to adapt to evolving situations without time pressures was essential. Brigadier David Jackson had a deep understanding of 5 R's operational approach, and once he sanctioned a plan, he allowed the battalion to proceed with their tasks. Preparations for a new operation, codenamed Queen Bayan, were finalized, and the commanding officer gathered his team for an orders group to relay verbal directions, provide written confirmation, and clarify any necessary details. On October 17th, the battalion stood ready to embark on their much-anticipated return to the Nui Thi Vai Hills, aiming to build on the successes achieved during Operation Canberra.